Many aeons before the building of Solomon's temple, life pierced the impenetrable, and the egg of void unfolded into definable negation of being. Standing at the banks of this swirling substance, there was only one witness. The lonely figure was robed in blue, a garment from which ignorance fled. His well-lit crown of gold commanded darkness's chaos to evaporate. This visitor came from a far greater reality than our own, in order to answer a call. And the call came in, speaking the words, "You are the chosen instrument of my hand, and I appoint you to be the builder of my temple. In your hands I placed the plans of living substance. I have weighed you in the balance, and you have not been found wanting. Therefore to you I give the glory of work. Hiram Abiff, chosen builder of your father's house, get up into your work. You will build without the sound of hammer or the voice of workmen, a temple eternal in the heavens." And so Hiram straightened his shoulders, and taking the layout design board in his hands, he walked slowly into primordial dawn. Wondering how to measure units of timeless eternity in this new reality, ages passed while the lonely builder labored. Molding the darkness into form, with his bare hands he kept his eyes raised above where the great voice had spoken. In divine solitude he labored, with no voice to cheer him on, and also no spirit to condemn his work. Realizing that no single hand alone could take on this hopeless task, he fashioned 3 huge creatures with no soul of their own. They were called thought, emotion, and action. But almost immediately, the threesome de-evolved into perverted thought, desiring emotion, and destructive action, a possible side effect of the current reality's density. But mud sat up, and they loomed like grim specters in the now semi-dark. Turning on their maker and striking him with his own tools, they left the Grandmaster Hiram Abiff dying in the midst of his labors, unfinished. Bleeding at the foot of his work, he spoke out loud to his master that dwelled in the prior realms. Radiating forgiveness, he prayed, "My labors are not finished. Why must they always remain undone? I have not completed your task. My very creation has turned against me. The very gift of your tools have destroyed me. By hands of ignorance I have been murdered. I give you back these tools and die a faithful builder." Hiram closed his eyes, grateful for his unique experience, before a great voice roared from beyond the primordial chaos. "He is not dead. He is asleep." But who will awaken this Mason? The only company that exists are his own creations of betrayal, and so likewise he must remain asleep until these 3 ruffians can resurrect the master themselves. Quite the divine irony indeed, because the very same personifications of thought, emotion, and action must now evolve from uncurbed to being shepherded into a wider sentience. Right thought, guided emotion, and correct action, the 3 together hold the key to the resurrection of Hiram, who is none other than you yourself. And so the 3 ruffians came to admit that their first action was a human weakness, but that their second would be of a sacred duty, resurrection. Unfortunately, Hiram was left with no grave marking the site of his death, so in the place of the tools used for murder, the great architect from the causal realm placed a small lantern in the hands of the 3. And why not? Hiram forgave them already, and they have repented. The architect instructed them to find their master's corpse under a broken twig of acacia strain by filling the silent chaos with his thundering word. "He cometh forth as a flower and is cut down. He fleeth also as a shadow, and continues not. Waters fail the sea, and so the same man lieth down and riseth not again. Behold, I have compassion upon the children of my creation. Go and seek where the broken acacia twig lies." Like strange phantoms of a dream, the 3 figures wandered over the great unknown, to this day seeking while carrying their tiny lamp. There is a good reason that this story ends right there, because you have to finish it. This ancient allegory takes on many forms, but each one bears the same meaning. The reader is the temple builder of the coming civilization. Frankly put, the foundation that you lay out today will be the cornerstone of your temple tomorrow. The legend parabolically insists that never before in the history of men have you had the opportunity that confronts you today. The world waits for the protagonist's illumination to ignite with humility in order to not find, but build the temple of wisdom and personally take up the slack that nobody else will in order to finish the architect's work. Before we dive in, I think it is necessary to give a solid example of how symbolism can be used to illustrate what words cannot. Viewers of this channel know that I always put symbolism up right here to complement my notes because, well, there are certain concepts that language alone cannot capture. I love Gnostic art, so this one is perfecto. At the bottom, we have the dragon, or the portion of man that requires cessation, worldly pleasures. It is hungry and burdened with bloodthirst. It has eyes all over because it must stay vigilant here in survival mode. The moon is behind it, symbolizing everything in this lower world being temporary. It comes, it wanes, and it goes. Above that is the sun, which comes and goes as well, but never wanes. It is always there and represents the prana that can always be tapped into. This is the inner flame or life force in all mankind that is so often ignored. Its home is the higher worlds or subtle realms. In front of this, we have the messenger that delivers us from the lower realms, represented by the angel. She holds wisdom that links the two worlds together and understands the necessity of both. This is your higher psyche or higher self. The baby is renewal of the spirit. Now that the suffering has been complete, the soul is birthed or delivered from darkness into light. The hands of the above gently take the child to be free from the so-called survival mode, because although it has matured in its previous world, it is new and fragile to this new one. On either side, we have poles of opposing forces, in this case, divine, masculine, and feminine. The opposites that have to be met in order to stay the middle path, making this path straight up. But no matter how straight shot the line is, the direction is only a tool, like a compass. It doesn't go anywhere unless it first has been in the depths to sprout roots. There is simply no way for the baby to be birthed without having first experienced the two opposing forces in the lower gross realms. The dragon is embraced before it is slain. Now, what is important to remember here is that your interpretation of this plate will be different from mine. That is the point, though. And it is precisely the reason that symbolism does what words cannot. By speaking to you, my words are decoded by your own personal dictionary. Everyone's is different. Symbolism speaks directly to your subconscious mind, and unfortunately that's why they use it in advertising to persuade you at the deepest level to make you think that you need something. But that is for a future video. Okay, so practical symbology. Symbolism is mysterious and cryptic, so a lot of fun indeed, but the mystique of its aesthetic often derails people from its purpose, which is to be used as a thought form or a mind tool in order to achieve insight or gnosis. It should be made clear, though, that no book or alchemical plate of symbols will ever cause any form of gnosis on their own. They are simply tools to guide the initiate. He's got to ignite that inner flame himself. In Masonic art, we often see the candidate ascending a collection of stairs. The 7 steps symbolize the main arts and sciences to be mastered by the candidate: grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. I kind of need to see music in there. And in a way, I suppose it is the invisible geometry of passing time, whereas the visual arts are geometry frozen in time. And sometimes ancient architecture captures both in the form of cymatics, but that'll be for a future video as well. The set of 5 steps represents the 5 senses of our own biological way of experiencing the world: hearing, seeing, smelling, feeling, and tasting. Something that seems to be obvious, but again, the reason that these are steps is because each one is to be mastered. Kind of like the 12-step program that perhaps some of us should be getting to know before any of these. I'll quit it. I'm joking about myself. Relax. And finally, the set of 3 steps represents the Trinity that has been a key role in just about every religious sect ever. A whole spiel on the Trinity can be found on our video Absurdity. And man, it really is crazy just how everything esoteric seems to be linked together. But the steps as a metaphor of graduation is perfecto, because we are the vehicle used for the psyche to climb in this upward direction. A man stands with one foot in heaven and the other foot on earth. The bull and its horns are a powerful force to be tamed, the animal nature. And so the God-given psyche and the earthbound animal body have to climb the ladder together as one. Before any of these steps can be approached, however, there are two pillars on either side at ground level. Like the chessboard floor, there is a good reason that they are at ground level, because both represent the dual nature of physical reality where everything seems to have poles. Polarity is indeed the foundation of tangible reality. We can't have up without down existing at the same time. We can't have a preference of good without simultaneously experiencing what we consider to be undesirable. In a way, this duality is why these philosophies exist in the first place. To ride on the current of universal law, we have to live in a world where things go against that very law, despite how futile the attempt. It's no spoiler that the entire world today seems to be grinding against the current of universal law. And that is what makes people who embrace these philosophies so rare. I saw a meme that was something along the lines of like, with everything being backwards, medicine destroying health, education destroying knowledge, churches destroying spirituality, and all of which doing so in the name of greed, it seems that the only way to be rebellious is to be a good person. And I suppose that we can call that a rebel with a cause. But how ironic that the only way to fight corruption in society is to become its opposite. If you fight fire with fire, you create more fire. Of course, it can be argued that fighting fire with fire has been a necessity in particular circumstances. But this is where the unification of opposites is the most critical. When something bad is done to rectify justice, it must be balanced back out in the aftermath. The hand that slays must also be used to lift the fallen. The lips that curse must also be used for prayer. And so, completely hypothetically speaking, if a man is taken out of the game because he gained wealth in a non-righteous manner, that wealth would be potentially taken on by the assailant. The assailant must turn around and distribute that very wealth to the community where it is needed and not pocket even a penny of it. This resistance of temptation is what unifies the opposites of the wrong that has been committed. You have heard your grandmother say that two wrongs don't make a right, and that's absolutely true. But if two wrongs do happen, it has to be doubly counteracted by good deed. Thus, the tension of the opposites are alleviated as if there is something greater keeping score. Because, well, there is. If he takes, he must now give. Through tears, he has learned to smile, and through death, he has learned to live. He looks for the higher things in the lower realms, and so the checkered board floor is there, on the ground and not on the ceiling. Because anyone in that room is walking above this duality. This duality is necessary to have a foundation in this tangible reality, and our body is stuck to it, but the mind can transcend it, sliding us right into our next bit of symbolism. At the top of these pictorial plates, we have the all-seeing eye, with the pyramid or Eye of Horus at the end or top of the staircase. We covered the mythology of Horus in a previous video, but let's take a look at this all-seeing eye that has become synonymous with evil due to the fact that it has been adopted by the $1 bill. Without getting too much into the history of the dollar, as it is not my genre here, it should be noted that the all-seeing eye was put on paper money in 1782, long before the dollar became an IOU banknote backed by the labor of unknown slaves. Basically, the symbol was just transferred over from something backed by gold onto something of merciless extortion of the people. Check out the Dark Matters podcast for plenty on that.
On the dollar, the eagle has 32 feathers on its left-hand side and 33 feathers on its right. 33 is the number of vertebrae up our spine, Jacob's ladder, a number symbolising the raising of the kundalini and the activation of the pineal gland, so we can be born again. Numerology and the occult power of 13. There are 13 arrows on the Great Seal, symbolising war and the inability of man to defend himself against the coming new age. There are 13 bars on the breastplate of the eagle, 7 white, the number of God, 6 black, 6 the hex, the number of man in the Vitruvian box, representing the spirit of man in matter. The 12 vertical lines on the plate denote governmental perfection in numerology. Government literally translating from the Latin governare, to control, mens the mind. E pluribus unum, meaning out of many one. The one world government formed from the 13. There are 13 levels to the cap pyramid. The capstone, the all-seeing eye, the eye of providence, Lucifer, the black sun, all names for Sirius. IHS, Isis, Horus, Set, the Jesuit bankers, the Vatican, creating the dead legal fiction, the all caps name, the straw man, decapitating your body from your head. Exodus 3:8, the land of milk, our pineal gland, and honey, our pituitary gland, our head, the Holy Grail. Annuit coeptus, Jupiter Almighty favour my bold undertakings. Jupiter, Peter meaning stone, the stone of the debt that Rome collects. Novus Ordo Seclorum, new order of the ages. A new world order based on depravity and rebellion. In God we trust, yet we must ask ourselves a deeper question. Just whose God is being referenced here?
The origin of the symbol may very well point to the unseen and formless sentience that pervades all matter. It's not just the eye of providence we see on the dollar bill where this is found. We see a single eye within a triangle in plenty of artwork all over the world, some of which not even necessarily associated with any religious sect. If the circle is divinity and the square is physicality, then the triangle seems to be a bridge between the two. With the eye at its center, it takes on a form of communion from above, or even guidance from the causal realms. And this is best personified by the Eye of Horus. That surely seems to look like the pineal gland within the brain. And what better a representation than that, considering that it is the pineal gland that is a transducer or a sort of radio receiver to pick up notions of divinity to be downloaded into this black cube of the physical vehicle. It is a way to capture the idea of piercing into the membrane of physical reality. And not so coincidentally, the triangle has a sharp point just to do just that. Masons are known to be builders of great architecture, as symbolized by the legend of Hiram Abiff building Solomon's Temple. This is a cornerstone of all trades and skills. This cornerstone so happens to serve as a perfect metaphor of how we use the skills we have developed to build on a higher vibratory foundation of existence. After a Mason has completed his earthly labor successfully, he may begin work on a higher plane than the average builder is safe to work on. This is why some versions of the legend of Hiram depict him being murdered by the 3 ruffians after he refused to drop knowledge per their request. They wanted to know something that they simply had not expanded enough to handle. This is not about hoarding knowledge, it is about keeping it safe. By giving pearls to pigs, the pearls will be desecrated in the filth. This is not to say that there is anything wrong with the pig or anything that it might symbolize, but that it is just still boxed up in that lower animal nature. When any sort of final judgment comes at the end of one's life, it is your own self that you will be answering to. This is what makes the cornerstone important. In literal terms, the cornerstone is the first block laid by the Mason in the east corner of its foundation, because all philosophy, it is said, comes from the East, a way for the Western philosophers to give nod to the ancient Zen masters that have truly been there and done that before us. But there is a bit of irony to the Eastern set of the Cornerstone, considering that the Zen masters did not bother to leave anything behind of their teachings, and the Cornerstone is often used to give a message set in stone to future generations, typically just the dates of build. This is one of the only places where Eastern Zen and Western philosophy are divided, the desire to be remembered and to pass on knowledge. Symbolically, however, the Cornerstone is what you do when no one is looking. It is the foundation of who you are without the risk of being caught. If you need a good way to gauge yourself in that regard, just take a look at how you treat people behind the screen online or in traffic where you will not be at risk of getting your teeth knocked out. Take a look at how you speak of others when that person is not around. Take a look at how you get out of bed in the morning when you don't have any formal obligations. Take a look at how you treat yourself when you are not expecting any company. This is your cornerstone, the first unit of your foundation. This is how well you are equipped to govern yourself, and so it is how qualified you are to govern others. Every government has a fear of secret societies. This is obvious when you see the way that they are propagated, even in independent media. But why? Well, this has everything to do with the conflicting goals of governments and secret societies. The reason a group would become a secret in the first place would be to escape the oppression of a government or other authoritarian figures such as religious elites, like the priests of the Vatican. What governments and organized religions have in common is the goal to control people through a game of dividing us into enemies and then conquering both sides with false promises of safety from the so-called other opposing team. When small groups within this madness wish to awaken their fellow men and women to their truest potentials, they would indeed be forced to do so in the shadows or be at great risk of dismantlement by the authoritarian egregore. This necessary secrecy would, of course, put that group under a lot of speculation and misunderstandings to the masses who are fooled by those who have assumed control. Basically, it is easy for a government or mainstream religious cult to paint an ill-hued picture of the secret society through propagated media to keep them feared and misunderstood despite the group's best attempts at helping humanity grow. If humanity grows, its controllability shrinks, because the next step of humanity seems to transcend the control of a governing force, as we would become sovereign beings without the need for guidance from these blind leaders. The most blatant way I've seen this done is when a government does something heinous and then just turns around and says that it was a secret society or a cult. The conspiracy peeps know this to be a false flag. This is a move that they certainly picked up from the church once upon a time. Works like a charm. And if the technique doesn't work, they will surely move on to more drastic measures. If we look back at the most famous assassinations of history, there is a common theme. They tend to kill off anyone who warns us about government blindness and control. People who lead by way of example concerning how to live harmoniously by becoming self-governed. Abraham Lincoln, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King Jr., Gandhi, John Lennon, Muhammad, Jesus, the list goes on. You can look for yourself. It is safe to say that if one truly wants to better humanity down to the individual, they had better do so secretly. The martyr might die, but the good of the truth will survive the assassination, and in many cases be fueled by it. Many great figures who we are familiar with have been Freemasons, but did not publicly disclose their dedication to the Brotherhood. Quite the opposite of your friend Sean, who just went down the street and applied and is now trying to get you to sign up after telling you that the G means God or geometry or something. Generative force. Some of my favorites are the sarcastic, sly guys like Mark Twain, Amadeus Mozart, Ben Franklin, Winston Churchill, and others who have quietly lived by the morals of this enigmatic group. And speaking of which, something said in our last video bears repeating here, that no person is at all obligated to take an oath or join into a fraternity in order to embody these ideals and standards of living. We can simply integrate the lessons of Masonic values into our daily life and thus accidentally spread this eternal spark of truth to this ever so distracted world. Each individual can play a small part in something big. They can impregnate society with a higher sense of purpose without preaching a gospel, simply by becoming one with the truth versus talking about it. Like Lao Tzu said, he who speaks does not know, and not a good start for me. The true Mason and or self-initiate understands that science and theology are two poles that must unite opposites in order to create a firm ground to build from. This is the foundation of the temple representing character. In this case, the character of an entire society. He understands that a person must endure either great sorrow or vigilant inner work to develop eyes tuned to see clearly. So in a way, he treats the world as a school, thus is always a student because he does not force himself into the position of teacher or correct others in their misconceptions, because he knows that he himself might be ill-conceived. Life does not bring light to man. It simply fills him with information and lessons. Turning that information into light is quite literally the alchemical process of the soul's evolution. This acceptance of information can only reflect that light back onto the world once it overflows in the individual. So in a way, man cannot be illuminated by outside sources. He has to create the illumination himself with the materials that he has been given. And there is never too few the amount of material. If we have learned anything from the ancient Zen masters, it is that illumination can surely come from nothing at all. So the question might come up, what does architecture have to do with this philosophy? Well, many religions have temples built outside of themselves to honor their own personal ideals of God. The Mason builds his temple within. He considers his character to be the temple and his self-mastery to be the Holy Grail. The world is his church, and he does not side with any particular dogma or political belief system. He realizes that the highest truth cannot be forced into our mental cognition through a specific teaching brought about by any individual group or specific way of thinking. The initiate will absorb many different forms or belief into his personal character without strictly adhering to any of them at all. Therefore, he or she is free from these limitations of belief and can kind of glean his or her own individual process. After all, the belief is just like definition. It's a form of limitation. The moment that you take on a belief, you are excluding all other possibilities that may have never even occurred to you later in life after you have matured. The persistence and precision that is required to erect a literal building cannot float in mediocrity. If the exterior glass of a hospital lets in water, it will form mold and thus health problems for the patients. Profitable for the hospital, but bad for the people. So the glazers do their work on 100% of the time. If a building's foundation is not structurally sound in every single part of its skeleton, well, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and it could fall due to the vibrations of the earth. So the iron workers and the concrete guys also have to be on 10. The carpenters also have to, All right, moving on. The initiate applies this very same work ethic to his everyday behavior and treats his character as he would when erecting a building that has to be immaculate to stand the test of time. So with this, it is safe to say that one does not have to be in the field of architecture to understand the moral compass laid out by the Freemasons that creates absolute certitude. But this architectural symbology is how we get the square and compass symbol embraced by the Freemasons. Both are tools necessary in architecture, but also have an obvious parallel to spiritual growth. The compass is used to draw fine circles and absolute ratios when it comes to curves. The right angle of the square ensures perfection in every corner. And if you are a frequent viewer of this channel, I don't have to tell you that this represents what we call the squaring of the circle. This is an ancient concept that goes way back before prehistory. We see it in the pyramids and in even smaller symbolic geometrical groundwork like Serpent Mound of Ohio. This is best captured in the symbol of the Philosopher's Stone, where we see Hermes Trismegistus displaying his work. But without repeating too much of those older videos, the circle represents divinity and the structure of the higher realms, while the square represents the structure of physical matter. This is where we get the black cube mythology. So how about that G that's just always pestering everybody? As we mentioned earlier, it is often conceived that the G in the center represents geometry, God, or even gnosis. And for good reason, because each of those fits the bill perfectly. But it seems that if you dig deep enough, the original meaning behind the G is for generative force, or genesis, so to speak, the creative principle put forth from all sentient life when the divine spark flows through it. If your creative genius is lacking, don't fear. You just have to find what it is that you are tuned to. Find the external thing, no matter how specific, that is a true reflection of what you are internally. Once you find that niche, become the architect of that craft. As long as your work is hinged solely on service to others, you will find it easy to flow down that river with your work. And you will profit from your endeavors, but of all the beneficiaries of your craft, you should put yourself last on the list. Start with looking around at what is needed in the world. Start small with your own children or neighbors, and offer your craft for free at first. This is a great way to open oneself to the power of Wu Wei, where, like water, flows effortlessly but can carve out mountains. The water's goal is to bring life to others, and by seeking the lowest point, this humility makes it immortal and essential. There is a quote often attributed to Carl Jung that he got from an anonymous alchemist, a quote that I certainly began to live by about 3 months before starting this channel. Carl said, "An old alchemist gave the following consolation to one of his disciples. No matter how isolated you are and how lonely you feel, if you do your work truly and conscientiously, unknown friends will come and seek you." Some might know the phrase better as, "if you build it, they will come." And it's absolutely true. I wrote Book of Wonderful Suffering for my son to have when I am gone. And you fast forward to today and here you all are. There are groups working in the shadows to bring the rest of us light. They understand that we have been deceived. How suiting this is, considering the goals and aspirations of these groups reflect that very theme on their sleeves. That is, to give without recognition, to do right while being accused of doing wrong. The building blocks of reality are irremovably math and geometry. This cosmic grid cannot be destroyed because it is that by which destruction can exist in the first place, but it can be extracted from. It is a structure, it is a building, and it is built by none other than Big Guns himself. And he has left his work unfinished on purpose. The work is unfinished because we are created to finish it. That is exactly how God experiences himself, through us. And God's work is no menial task. The members of these hidden groups die, but their philosophies funnel into another eon to utter the suppressed truth spoken by the hearts of us all, no matter how faint it speaks or how distracted we have been made from it. So gather up the tools of conduct and behavior set in stone by the members of the Grand Lodge, and do so without any form of initiation, unless so desired, and walk into reality while secure and sovereign with your own individual forms of tradition-breaking morals and dogma. Waiting for you at the top of the staircase is safety and righteousness, right thought, shepherded emotion, and correct action. And feel safe when you eventually meet the one who passes judgment on your cornerstone, because that judge is you.
Task to watch over paradise and make it